I would like to call Randula Mawaththa to present Introduction to Framework and Testing, who is a third-year software engineering software undergraduate working as a software engineering intern at LSEG Technologies. It's time for you to make your mark on the screen, Randula.
Right, thank you, Sita. Right, so good morning, everyone. In this section, I'm going to explain about introduction to testing and frameworks. So my name is Randula Mawaththa. I'm a third year undergraduate following software engineering, and also I'm a member of MS Club of SLIIT. So in this session, this session is divided into main two parts as frameworks and testing. So in the frameworks section, I'm going to explain about what are the frameworks, the difference between libraries and frameworks, what is a technology stack, and also I'm going to explain about some frameworks and technologies. So how to choose a specific technology stack for your project. And I'm going to explain about some about quick introduction to the databases and also the importance of using documentation on your project. Right. And in the testing section, I'm going to explain about what is testing, importance of testing, and some details about popular testing tools and frameworks. And also as an additional point, explaining about writing a test case on a given template. Right. So first, let's move into the framework session. So what are frameworks? Frameworks acts as a structure of an application or a software that you can build. And also frameworks acts as a foundation that developers can build their application on a specific form, specific platform, whether it's a web application, mobile application, or a desktop application. So frameworks are typically associated with some sort of a specific programming language, whether it's either Java, JavaScript, or Python. And each frameworks have different sorts of tasks, functionalities, and services. Right. And given as in this image, assume you are building a house. When you are building a house, you need to build the house according to the necessary requirements that you need. For example, in this scenario, you need some different sort of components like the structure, the roof, the wall components, the paints, to which provides each different sort of functionalities to combinedly build the necessary house according to the requirements. So think of this scenario for an application. If you are for building an application, you need to use different sort of functional components that needs to which contains it different sort of functionalities in required providing the proper scenario for your application. So as also you need to properly handle those functional components as in for your accounts. Right. Talking about the difference between library and frameworks. So both libraries are frameworks and libraries and frameworks are pre-written modular codes that has been written by someone else that is reusable. So their main purpose is to help by solving problems in an easier way. So assume as a library that you are going into a furniture store. You already have a home, but you need some help with the furniture. In this scenario, you don't feel like building a table or a chair from the scratch on your own. So the furniture store allows you to buy the specific furniture you need from different things according to your requirement for your home. So as a conclusion, when you are using a library, you are in control of the scenario. And using a framework, on the other hand, is like building a model house. You have a set of blueprints, set of plans, and set of requirements. And there are some limited choices when you are coming into the architecture and design of the house. So ultimately, the contractor and the blueprints are in control of the house that you are building, and they will let you know when the house is completed, what are the final requirements, Yeah, something like that. And as a conclusion between the difference between libraries and frameworks, as I mentioned earlier, when you're using a library, you are in control of the full scenario. That means you are invoking the library and the rest relevant function is provided. And when you're using a framework, by the framework, the framework invokes the relevant function and provides you the required services. So in this scenario, it provides you an example of how the libraries and functions are working as an image. So basically what happens is your code calls a library and the frameworks are often contains with libraries, and also the control flow for frameworks is predefined. That means you don't have an access to control change the frameworks, change the structure of the framework. And in this case, frameworks calls your code and provide the relevant services and functionalities, right? So why do we use frameworks in our application? So as a most important point, by using the framework, you can save time and reduce the risk of getting errors in your application, because frameworks are pre-built code, and the frameworks are meant to reduce the errors when you're using. And also, as an important other point, sorry, as an important other point, when you're using frameworks, you can avoid the duplication and the repetition of codes in your application. And also, the frameworks are helpful to improve the scalability. And in the security side, the frameworks are built to improve the security of the specific application. So you are getting more secure code. And after the development process, you might get the phase where you have to test or debug the application. In this scenario, when you're using frameworks, the testing and debugging processes will be easier. And also the maintenance and deployment processes will be easier when you're using framework. Right. So what is a technology stack? When you are building an application, you need to consider the whole required scenario, like the platform, whether it's a mobile or a desktop application, the programming language that you're using, the frameworks, the databases, and the other factors. So as an important point, each of those layers provide different sort of services and functionalities for your application. So you need to clearly understand the requirements of your application, and you need to select the specific technology stack that is required for your application according to the requirements and functionalities you need. Right. So as a conclusion, most of technology stacks are a combination of front-end and back-end technologies. Since most of the time they are written in the same programming language, like whether it's either JavaScript or Python. So those full stack technologies are most compatible with each other, and also with the databases and other components that you are using. So let's move into that section. So talking about some popular frameworks and technologies, as Lasalaya mentioned earlier. So there are several JavaScript popular frameworks for the front-end development, like React.js, AngularJS, and Vue.js. And also there's a popular Python framework for the front-end development, like Django. And for the back-end development, you can use a JavaScript framework like Node.js, or a C# framework like .NET, Microsoft.NET. And if you are hoping to use Java-based framework for your backend development, you can use Spring or Spring Boot, Spring Boot. And there's another backend framework as Fast API. Fast API is a Python-based framework, and also Laravel. Laravel is a PHP-based framework. Right. So I'll talk about technology stacks in the previous slides. So basically, these technology stacks have been is a combination of front-end and back-end technologies, which written most of the time they are written in the same programming language. So when we are talking about mean stack, man stack, moment stack, the main programming language that they have been used in their stacks is JavaScript. So all of these three stacks use their database as MongoDB. And for the backend and REST API development, they're using Express.js and Node.js. So what differs them from each other is what they're using for the front-end development. So in mean stack, they are using AngularJS, and MERN stack, they are using React.js, and in MERN stack, they are using Vue.js. So also there's a popular stack as LAMP stack. LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and for the backend development, you can use either PHP or Perl or Python, whatever suits for your requirements. So another few points to consider when you are choosing a stack. So as Dharani have mentioned earlier, this project is standard for a limited time. So you need to properly consider a framework and whether you have to consider whether is this framework is capable of learning in a limited time and are you able to complete this application successfully. So if you are hoping to use a JavaScript framework, you can use React.js and Node.js for your application. And also another point, if you are, it is important to choose a proper ID for your development processes as well. And if you are hoping to use Visual Studio Code for your development, you can yeah, you can you can install many sort of extensions that would be helpful for your development process. And also, if you are planning to learn some sort of uh, different framework that is also easier to learn, you can follow up on Spring Boot. And as an important point, Spring Boot is based on a Maven application. So in this scenario, you need to you need to handle you need to have an IDE that is capable of handling the Maven project. So in this scenario, you can use like you can use an IDE like IntelliJ IDEA, the standard version to handle the Maven application, because IntelliJ is capable of handling the Maven application properly, right? And also, if you are planning to use JavaScript frameworks, you need to consider a package manager to handle the dependencies of your application. For as a package manager, you can use either npm or yarn. And as a few important point, you can use White for your front end development project to improve the performance and the deployment process of your application. Right. So how to choose a technology stack for your application? So before you are choosing a technology stack, you need to properly conduct a feasibility study of your application to and understand the necessary requirements of your project. So other than that, you need to consider is this technology stack is cost effective, and as I mentioned earlier, can your team is able to build a proper fully functional application with a limited time by using this stack? And also, is this stack is providing the necessary functionalities that is required for your application, like yeah. And also, as an additional point, you can consider as whether is this application follows the security guidelines that is required for you. Right. So as some additional points, when you are using a stack for a small scale project, you can use a Python framework and Node.js. And in this ITP scenario, you might be working on a mid-sized project. So you can use either MERN stack, min stack, or LAMP. So actually these projects follows as a requiring of a more complex stack and several layers of different technologies. And there are some other points that is like if your application is consist of many inputs and outputs operation, you can use a JavaScript framework. And if your application is looking for scalability, you can use Django, Spring Boot, or Ruby like frameworks. And most importantly, if you are building a real-time application, it would be easier to use it will be easier to use the JavaScript framework on your application. Right. So talking about databases in your application. So when you are choosing technology stacks and components for your project, database is the backbone section where it handles all the dynamic data that is in your application. So basically, there are this database section can be divided into main two parts, and there are some other databases. But in this scenario, we can divide this database to as SQL and NoSQL. And SQL databases stands for SQL databases stands for structured query databases, structured query language, and NoSQL stands for not only SQL, not only structured query language. The main difference between SQL and NoSQL databases can handle be SQL databases are relational. SQL databases behaves as relational databases, and also NoSQL databases behaves as non-relational databases. Right. There are some other differences between those databases as SQL databases contains with fixed, static, or predefined schemas, and NoSQL databases contains with dynamic schemas. And also SQL databases are best compatible with complex queries, since they are in SQL databases, they contain relationships between the tables, and NoSQL databases are not suitable for complex queries. And as some additional points, SQL databases can be vertically scalable. NoSQL databases can be horizontally scalable. For example, SQL databases I can provide you as MySQL, Oracle, and MS SQL Server. For NoSQL, I can provide you as MongoDB, GraphQL, and Neo4j. I'll show you how these databases work. Right. When you are talking about the SQL database, the schema of the database, the schema of the table is predefined, and the table and the data of the database is stored as a rows in the given table. That means the schema is already defined as there are some predefined number of columns and rows. And also, as you can see, if you are checking the design of the database, that each of those tables can be connected with each other by using primary keys and foreign keys. And when you are talking about a NoSQL database, the schema between these different two datasets is different. That means the schema is not defined, and you can enter a data that is according to the schema you need. And also, as an important point, the data in my SQL database is stored as a rows in a table, and in data in NoSQL databases stores as documents. Right. Going back to the presentation. Talking about the importance of using documentation for your project. As responsible students and developers, before you start in the project, you need to properly conduct a feasibility study for your project, and you need to document all the requirements. You document and clarify all the requirements, your business goal, and activities and other functionalities on your project. And also, this will be helpful in proper communication, and you can design and specify your project with this documentation. With these documentations, if the when the development process is ongoing, if you came across any issues, any doubts, or how this function should be work, how these services should implement, you can refer to the documentation and get some answers about how to fix in this doubt or issue. And also, if there is a developer who is behind in this work, the developer can refer to this documentation and check and get up to date to his development process work. Right. So moving into the testing section. So what is testing? Imagine that you are building this web application, and at some point you need to evaluate and verify the functionalities, the usability, the security, and the performance of this web application to check whether it's properly executed. So for this scenario, you need to implement some sort of a specific functional components that is according to some guidelines, and whether to evaluate and test, whether to work on this evaluating and verifying process. So this process is mentioned as testing. So there are some testing types in software testing section. as popular types, I can mention as unit testing, integration testing, system testing, acceptance testing, alpha and beta testing, and also regression testing. So as the importance of testing, as a main important, I can when you are working on a when you are working on an application, you can implement the test cases or run test stores on your application. And when you are working on that, you can identify any defects of your application. And after identifying them, it will be easier to you can easily fix those issues. And with that, you can ensure the quality and ensure the quality of your application and also enhance the user experience of your application. And as Dharani has mentioned earlier, customers are not technical people. So they don't have a proper idea about how the development process is working on. If you are able to implement some test cases of your application, and after the test cases have successfully executed, you can show this test cases result for your client. And in this scenario, the client can understand that, okay, these test cases are working fine, these all test cases are passed, so my application is working properly. So in this scenario, this will be helpful to boost the customer's confidence of the application that you are building. And also there are some other points as the cost and time efficiency, the security and risk mitigations. And also a few additional points you can process on test-driven development method. That means you can work on a specific functionality, and parallel when you're working on the functionality, you need to implement the relevant test cases for your required function. And in this case, you need to implement the function. Running the test case, you can identify any defects or issues, and after that, you need to properly fix the issues of your functionalities. Right. So as some popular testing tools, for the front-end testings, you can use Selenium or SOAP UI. And for the back-end testing, you can use Postman or Insomnia. So what happens in this scenario when you are working on the back-end testing is you can, when you're building a REST API, you can invoke those REST APIs by using an application like Postman. And you can check whether that REST API is giving you the desired response according to the features that you have been setting, like whether it's you are passing a parameter from the REST API or a set of data by the REST API. Right. And when you are implementing test cases on your application, you need to follow up some testing frameworks. So for like Java-based frameworks, you can use JUnit or TestNG. For JavaScript-based frameworks, you can use Jest or Mocha or Chai, something from one of those testing frameworks. Right. So when you are working on this ITP project, at some scenario, you might get an assignment about how to implement assignment to write some test cases on a given template and upload the document into the Postgres. So what they're expecting in this scenario, that means you have to manually test a field or another function in your application. And you need to manually write some test cases, manually check the expected output and enter the result of the following given test case. As an example, in this template, it contains contains a section to implement the testing step. That means how should you execute the relevant test cases. Some preconditions, that means what is the how to get a proper environment of to get the following test case, and also some description. And there's another table. There's a table for record the test cases. So within this scenario, you are testing the field input in your application. So you can check for you can check for three events, like you are entering a proper value in your field, and you entering an invalid value in your field, and you are not entering any value. That means you are keeping the field empty and submitting the form. So all of these three scenarios have three different sort of should have three different sort of expected outputs. And by manually executing the test cases, you can check whether this function is giving you the expected giving the actual output according to the expected output. And by this scenario, you can consider whether this test case is passed or failed. Right. So that is the conclusion of my section of this session.